Hi class, this is video 3 of Animal Diversity and Evolution for Bio1005. So we finished up with chordates, but I'm just going to start with chordates again just to make it fit better. So the characteristics of chordates are our 9th phylum, are going to be that they all have a dorsal hollow nerve cord, a notochord, pharyngeal slits, and a post-anal tail. There are two groups of chordates that are invertebrates. So most of you have probably heard of vertebrates. They have the spinal column, but there are actually chordates that haven't quite gotten to be vertebrates yet. So we're going to see these in our lab. One of them is a lancelet, and they have a mouth and the tail, and they bury themselves in the sand, and they get their food in through their mouth. Another one are tunicates. These two chordates are found in the ocean. All the other chordates are vertebrates. So if we look at our study guides, if you look at the very bottom of page 2, you will see, I forgot to tell you this. So if you look at the very bottom of page 2, you see chordates, and then everything else is going to be indented. So if you hold up page 3, it is chordates. All of these are chordates that are on page 3. Okay, just so you know that. So what do I want you to know for lancelets? We're going to be looking at these in the lab. We have examples of lancelets. Lancelets and tunicates have no cranium. So you're just writing no cranium there. All right, so now we're moving on to page 3 of the study guide. All other chordates are vertebrates. They have those 4 features that we just talked about for chordates. They also have a backbone and a cranium. So on the top of page 3 of your study guide, after vertebrates, just write backbone and cranium. And then we're going to start into the hagfish and the lampreys. This is an overview of chordates and vertebrate evolution. So they all had an ancestral chordate. The earliest to evolve were the tunicates, then the lancelets. I'm going to briefly talk about the hagfish and the lampreys. Then we're going to get into the 2 different types of fish and the amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. So lampreys. These are the first vertebrates, probably evolved 542 million years ago, right after the Precambrian era. These guys lack jaws. Okay, so we're kind of defining them by what they don't have. So these guys do not have jaws. You can see this is their mouth. It's kind of a rasping mouth. Hagfish have a really interesting defense mechanism where if something threatens them or a fish tries to bite them, they put out this super slimy snot stuff covering their whole body, and that will plug the gills of a fish. The fish starts to suffocate, and the fish just wants to get the hell away, and then the hagfish is able to escape. So moving on to cartilaginous fishes. What word do you see that's familiar? Cartilage. So cartilaginous fishes have a flexible skeleton made out of cartilage. The big thing that evolved here were jaws. Okay, so we can open the mouth to eat. We will have an example of a baby shark. Okay, don't start singing the song. Don't start singing the song. But we will have a baby shark in the lab. The next kind of fish that evolved was the bony fish. So the first fish had cartilage. So what do you think the bony fish have? Let's look at the name. Bone is right there in the name. So now these guys have a skeleton that's reinforced by calcium salts. Other interesting things, all you have to write is bony fish have bones, cartilaginous fish have cartilage skeletons and jaws. Another interesting thing, you won't be asked about this at all. They have a lateral line system, keen sense of smell, excellent eyesight. There is information on bony fishes versus ray-finned fishes. There's also lungfishes, lobe-finned fishes. One interesting thing is that some of these fish evolved a swim bladder that kept them buoyant so that they can remain motionless, while many of the cartilaginous fishes need to keep moving. The swim bladder, there is evidence that the swim bladder also evolved into lungs. So I am not going to ask you on the test anything about fish, but I will be asking you about amphibians, reptiles, and birds and mammals. Well, not birds. Amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. So amphibians. These guys need water to reproduce. So what is their characteristic that you're writing down? These guys were the first vertebrates to colonize land. Okay, so before this, the life was in the ocean. So the other characteristic I want you to know, they were the first vertebrates to colonize land. And how did they do this? They have 4 feet. So these are the terrestrial vertebrates. So they have 4 feet. The other characteristic that's interesting about them, I'm going to go back. They need water to reproduce. So just like our early plants needed water to reproduce, that was the bryophytes and the seedless vascular, they needed that layer of moisture to get the sperm to the egg. The amphibians usually need to return to water to lay their eggs. And then the young develop in the water for the most part. All right, so moving on to reptiles. The 2 characteristics I want you to know about reptiles is that they lay eggs in which the embryo develops, and then they also possess waterproof skin. So why would they need waterproof skin? This is not to keep water out, it's to keep water in. Okay, so the amphibians are going to be kind of tied to the water, whereas the reptiles can move further inland and they really don't need that body of water in order to survive. I mean, every animal needs to drink water, but not to reproduce. Okay, so the waterproof skin is to keep water inside of them so they don't dry out. The interesting thing here with reproduction is the amphibians, the previous animals, laid eggs in the water. So how were the reptiles going to lay their eggs if there's no water around? So what they developed was this amniotic egg. So they kind of brought the pond to their baby by putting the embryo, surrounding it in this amniotic fluid, surrounding it with its own little pond, and then putting it in an eggshell. So that's the important thing about reptiles, the amniotic egg, the waterproof skin that keeps water in. I want you to know examples of reptiles, be able to give me an example on both the lab and the exam. We've got snakes, lizards, turtles, crocodiles, alligators. Oh, and I forgot, man, I'm doing a bad job with video 3. If you go back to amphibians, okay, you're going to need an example of an amphibian. So, frog. Okay, hopefully everybody knows frog is an amphibian. I have some students confuse reptiles with amphibians. So make sure you're telling me about a reptile. If you return to page 1 of your study guide, you've got the word ectotherm. So an ectotherm is an animal that obtains their body heat from the environment. Okay, so these guys are going to survive in areas where sun is available. You're not really going to find a lot of reptiles in Minnesota where it's cold. One advantage of this is that you don't need to eat as much. You don't need to eat as many calories if you're getting your warmth from the environment instead of from your body. So return to page 1. One of your last terms is ectotherm. So reptiles diversified extensively during the Mesozoic era. On the matching part of your exam, you're going to be matching Mesozoic with the time of the dinosaurs. So now birds, if we look at page 3, it's not indented, but birds evolved from a lineage of small two-legged dinosaurs. One of the best pieces of evidence for this, some of you may have used in your evidence of evolution, is the fossil of Archaeopteryx. This is a very famous fossil that shows part bird, part reptile features. So we've got teeth in the fossil, like a reptile. We've got these wing claws that modern day birds don't have, feathers, which modern day birds do have, and a very long tail, which is like a reptile but not like a bird. So it's kind of the in-between of reptiles and birds. So the things about birds, we will see one in lab. Their bones are modified to make less weight. They're honeycombed. They have the absence of some internal organs. Like sometimes we have 2 sets of organs. They will only have 1 of that organ. And then if you go back to your page 1, your very last term on page 1 is endotherm. Birds are using the food that they eat to keep them warm. So they maintain a warm, constant body temperature. And that means that you've got to eat way more calories than a reptile. Okay, this is what we are. We don't have to go sit in the sun, even though sometimes it's fun to do, just go sit in the sun. But we don't have to do it to survive. Okay, we are eating food in order to warm our bodies, just like birds. Alrighty, so we should be done with page 1 of the study guide now, and we finished page 2. So let's continue work on page 3. So mammals, the first true mammals probably came about 200 million years ago. They were probably nighttime livers, insect eaters. They probably lived in trees. Most mammals are terrestrial. Of course, we've got the whales and the dolphins that went back into the ocean. The 2 key features of mammals are going to be hair and mammary glands. Okay, you will have to know this as a short answer on the exam, that mammals have hair and mammary glands. You can think of them as hair and boobs, except the early evolved mammals do not quite have boobs. They have these glands that the young have to drink from. So 3 major groups of mammals. I will be giving you a list on the exam of the monotremes, marsupials, and eutherians, and I'm going to want an example of each. Okay, so monotremes are almost like the in-between of a bird to a eutherian mammal, because monotremes lay eggs still. So the monotremes are the egg-laying mammals. There are only two, not species, but two types of monotremes still on the planet, and they both live in Australia. One of them is the platypus. The other is this guy named the echidna. They have beaks like a bird. They lay eggs, but they nurse their young. So now moving on to marsupials, the next type of mammal. This is where we have the young are born rather than hatched. They're inside the mother in an organ called a placenta. So the first ones to evolve were the marsupials. They have pouches. So this is a nipple of a marsupial. This is inside the pouch. The babies are born extremely small. They crawl up the mother's belly by themselves. They get inside the pouch, and then they hook on to a nipple like this, and they are further developed within the pouch of the mother. So born very, very small. If we go back one to the platypus and the echidna, these guys, the mothers have glands that kind of ooze out milk, almost like a sweat gland. So the young have to actually kind of lick the mother in order to get the milk from her. But these guys haven't exactly developed a nipple yet. So marsupials, they do have the nipples. They have the pouches. Eutherians are going to be us. Okay, these are mammals who have a placenta that lasts a longer time. You don't have this tiny embryo looking thing like we do with the marsupials being born, but the baby is actually born, and in many cases, like we think of the zebra, they are ready to go within hours. Of course, that's not the case with humans, but the placentas provide a long-lasting association between the mother and her developing young. So on the test, you're going to have to give me an example of a monotreme. That would be a platypus. I didn't spell that out, but it's Platypus, platypus. And then marsupials. Kangaroo is an example. A possum. So eutherians, you could say a zebra, you could say a human, a dog, camel. Any of these are going to be placental mammals, eutherians. So now we're going to get into, I see we're at 18. So yeah, why don't I start primates and then I'll stop this in just like a minute. So primates are a kind of mammal, so we're going to be talking about that. You don't have much of this on the exam except for page 4 where we have human evolution. So let me do the evolution of primates. So they evolved from insect-eating mammals, the late Cretaceous period. They were very small, they lived in trees. The distinguishing characteristics were because they lived in trees. So primates had really good shoulder joints, eyes in front of the face, excellent eye-hand coordination, extensive parental care. If we look at the evolutionary tree, we've got 3 main groups. We've got monkeys, we've got hominoids. Both of those are considered anthropoids. Then we've got these early two, the lemurs, lorises, podos, and the tarsiers, which didn't quite make it into monkey. And I'm at 20 minutes, so I'm going to stop here.